Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing? Welcome to California Haunts Radio. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour or so. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of sunny Sacramento, California. It is sunny today. And in case you have a paranormal need, you can get a hold of us, or you think you have a paranormal need, you can get a hold of us. We're everywhere on the internet now. You can find us at TikTok, you name it, we're there. We're there. It might take us a while to get to you because California is a huge state, but we will get to you, and we'll get to you in the most prompt way we can. Tonight, my guest, we got a great guest. I'm excited. I love talking about shapeshifters, and I hope you do too. We're going to be talking about all kinds of things, and I know he has some new books out, or a new book out that you know, he'll want to talk about this stuff. But I'm going to let him introduce himself and everything because he's been on the show before, and we've always had a great time with him. So, yeah, quick couple of announcements. I will be on TikTok tonight at 7 p.m. Pacific to do tarot card readings for you. And join me over there in the California Haunts. You can see the tether running beneath us. And what that tether is right now TikTok does not have coins available to people. So what people have been doing is they've been donating just through Cash App and things like that. So when you're on TikTok, and I know a lot of you are that are listening, feel free to do that for now until they get the coin system up. There's still things that still aren't working over there. But anyway, enough about money and enough about that stuff. Happy day. Let's get John Kachuba in here and let's talk to him and see what's happening with him. It's been a while since we've had him. Here we go. Hello, sir.
Yeah. Hello, Charlotte. How are you?
How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
It's great. It's great. It's just so fun to see you. I've been looking forward to this.
It's been quite some time since we've been on. So
yeah.
Good to see you.
Yeah, and I took like a month off because I was having internet issues and I was setting up stuff over for TikTok and all this, and so we're finally back on the air, fully functional. Good. So for the people that don't know you, tell us about you, sir.
Well, so I'm a writer, primarily. I have 13 books out in print right now, and probably half of them have to do with the paranormal, and by paranormal, primarily ghosts, although I guess we're going to maybe be talking about shapeshifters tonight. My Shapeshifters, a history book, came out in 2019. No, I'm sorry, 2023. So just a couple years ago. And that was a Bram Stoker Award finalist in nonfiction. And it is nonfiction about shapeshifters. But I've been doing this now for quite some time. I've been investigating, haunted locations and everything for the last, probably about last 25 years or so, throughout the United States, as well as, countries abroad and all that. And I'm coming to you from beautiful, sunny Cincinnati, Ohio. It is sunny, but it's freaking cold. We're down to single digits. It's just like crazy. But anyway, so that's me in a nutshell. I get on these shows. I'm glad to be on your show, and I do a lot of these kinds of things. I do a lot of public appearances at libraries and universities and conferences and that kind of thing as well. So.
Along those lines, my father grew up in Cleveland. And,
okay. Well, I won't hold it against him.
When he would take us up to the snow line, right? Taking us up to Tahoe and stuff, he would say, "Look how pretty white this is." And my mom and I,
right.
Yeah,
right,
isn't it pretty?
Right.
He'd go, "Well, give it a day." He said it'll become black snow. And so I have this beautiful Christmas village that I built and painted and all this, and I put snow on there.
Okay.
And he's been gone like 11 years now, right? Maybe more than that. And all the snow is turning brown. And I called my sister and I said, "I'm going to have to redo the snow." And she goes, "Why?" I says, "Because it's turning into Cleveland snow now." And she laughed. She says, "Oh my God, that's what Dad said." So so I remember all that stuff about the snow turning black.
That's the 2 or 3 day old snow.
Yeah, the 2 or 3 day old.
We had a snowfall here. I guess it was last week. That was a record-setting snowfall in Cincinnati. Cleveland being on the lake, they get a ton of bad weather. We're way down in the Ohio River Valley. 4 hours away from Cleveland, almost
Yeah.
5. So we don't get much snow. But this
Right.
last snowstorm, we had 12 inches in one day, and it was just like unbelievable. So,
That's
I mean,
crazy.
at least we have plows, unlike New Orleans and those
Well, look at
areas.
Florida. Yeah, Florida's had
Florida,
issues.
yeah,
Six
I
inches of
know.
snow. Wow.
Oh
We've never
well.
gotten that here at all.
Anyway,
So, what got you interested in the shapeshifters?
well, as I said before, I do a lot of public speaking, and
Uh
in
huh.
the past, it had been primarily about ghosts because of I have five ghost
Mhm.
books. By the way, they're all on my website, which is johnkachuba.com, so people can see them there and pick them up. But what I noticed was that a lot of times I give these talks, and invariably there would be people in the audience who would have their own stories, and afterwards they say, I got a ghost story to tell you. And frequently I would hear stories about some entity or something that they saw or heard about. And I'd say, boy, that doesn't really sound like a ghost. It sounds like
Mhm.
something different. And I thought, almost sounds like a shapeshifter, sort of the classical shapeshifter. So I just started wondering about the popularity. Like, why were so many people telling me stories about shapeshifters and that kind of
Mhm.
thing? And I just started doing some research. And that's what sort of, it didn't switch me over completely, but that's
Right.
what put me into a new avenue there, from ghosts to shapeshifters. And what I
Have
found
you?
in my research was that
Go ahead.
almost every country in the world, almost any culture in the
Mhm.
world, from ancient times to today, when I say ancient, I mean like prehistoric times,
Mhm.
have had some shapeshifter character in like their folklore or their mythology or their
Mhm.
religion, um, or and not even just one, but sometimes many different ones, and they're
Mhm.
out till today, to modern days. The shapeshifters, they're a very very common and very what I say intriguing character.
Mhm. Mhm. Have you written that? Have you written? Have you read that book that was written in the 1700s, 1800s by that priest?
I did.
You have.
Yeah.
It's funny because I saw this on Little House on the Prairie, of all places.
No
It was a
kidding.
Halloween episode of Little House on the Prairie,
Oh wow.
and Mrs. Wilder was giving it to the kids to read this book, and I thought, oh, it's got to be a prop.
Oh yeah. No, and I try to remember the priest's name, his last name I think was Calmet, something
Yeah, he
like
was
that. He was
Anglican.
French. He was a
Oh,
French
or something. Yeah,
Dominican priest.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
and
basically he went through all of Europe
yes,
investigating all kinds of paranormal stuff,
yeah,
werewolves, witches, vampires, ghosts, everything. But yeah, he was actually, but it was probably more like in the 1600s, I think. I
yeah,
don't,
something
I
like
can't
that.
remember the
Yeah,
title. It's a
it
very
goes
long
way back.
title.
Yeah, it goes way back.
Yeah. But I cite it in my Shapeshifters book, and it was a good guide because it kind of gave me a little bit of historical look at how people thought about shapeshifters, and
Yeah.
also kind of placed them in some different areas.
Mhm.
Because I actually was in like 8 different countries to do research for the book,
Mhm.
so I would go to places that had shapeshifter stories or history in that area and check it out, talk to people, get their take on their stories and everything else like that.
We actually read that book live on our Sunday show
Which
over a
one?
few Sundays. The Shapeshifters book.
Really?
Yep.
And what show was that you read at Sunday
I do a
live?
Sunday show where I read paranormal books, different
Okay,
paranormal books. Some
and
are
you read it
true,
cover to
some
cover.
yeah, some are true, some are fun. Some are fantasy, but
Interesting.
for the most part they're true. And that was the book. And when I saw it on the show, I thought, well, it's a prop. So I get over to Gutenberg.org, where they have all those books, and sure enough, there it was. And I thought,
Oh
okay,
yeah,
I'll give it a try. That guy was
yeah,
sharp. That guy
yeah.
was sharp that wrote that.
Well, I mean, he did a lot of research. He traveled, like I said, he traveled all around Europe,
Yeah.
investigating cases. A lot of it had to do with werewolves and witches,
Mhm. Mhm.
particularly. But yeah, he did a lot of investigation into all that kind of stuff.
It's just amazing because of the way the beliefs were back then. That this guy would actually have the smarts to go out there and do this without being ridiculed by others and stuff.
Yeah,
And called a witch himself because of it.
right. Well, I mean, he wouldn't, he wouldn't get ridiculed so much because there was this whole thing about, the devil versus God. And of course, all
Mhm.
these paranormal entities were the work of the devil, according to
Mhm.
people in those days. So being a churchman, he was a Dominican. Um, his job was like he was, what would you call it? Like God's ambassador or God's
Yeah.
protector in a way.
Yeah.
He was going after the bad guys, the demon guys.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So when you look at shapeshifting right now, what do you think, as far as the modern age, what do you think is the most common shapeshifter that people report?
I think well, from what I hear, primarily we're still talking about most of the shapeshifting sightings being either a werewolf or something in that category, like some kind of a canine, like for instance in the Southwest, with some of the Native American tribes there, the Utes and the Dene people. They frequently talk about shapeshifters that transform into coyotes or that kind of thing. Sometimes wolves. So primarily canine, I guess. So as I'm talking about it, and I think the werewolf is still probably the number one shapeshifter that people think about when you say, what comes to your mind when you say shapeshifter? I think most everybody immediately jumps to, oh yeah, werewolf. Then vampire probably secondarily.
Because you just talked about that old book about the way he was able to categorize these things. Is there a lot of difference between how we categorize them now as opposed to how he categorized them? You think?
Well, I think the big thing was again his bias was that he was coming from a religious basis on this, right? So his classification was that there are all kinds of things, and there could be all kinds of things because of the work of the devil, who could create these monsters, whatever they were, shapeshifters or whatever. Right? Well, we've come a long way, from that. I don't think, at least when I've talked to people recently and did modern research, I don't hear sort of a religious bent there. I don't hear people saying, "Oh, yeah, well, a werewolf must be the work of the devil." I mean, there might be people that believe that. But that's not what I'm hearing so much anymore. So I think that's the big thing, is moving the shapeshifters out of the realm of theology and just more into, I don't know what you want to call it, metaphysics, cryptozoology. I don't know,
Yeah.
but kind of a more human basis, I guess, is the way to look at it.
Okay, absolutely. So when you talk about people seeing like werewolves or whatever they want to call them, chupacabras, whatever we're talking about, where do you see, like in the United States, where do you see the most concentration of people seeing this stuff?
They're all over, and they really are. I mean, like I said, the Southwest, is big for skinwalkers, which are types of
Okay.
shapeshifters. But up here in Ohio, we've got something called the Ohio Grass Man, which is kind of like a Bigfoot. People think that maybe that's a shapeshifter. People think that the Bigfoot, Sasquatch, might be shapeshifters, and they're all through the West. Up in the upper Midwest, there's dogmen, as they call them, which are weird critters, mostly with the head of a dog and a human body. And no one is sure if they're actually shape shifting or if that's just how they are all the time. And Wendigos further up and going into Canada, So, I mean, they're really all over America. Like I said, they're all over the world. That was the one thing that surprised me when I started doing the research, was just the sheer number of shapeshifter characters around the world. I mean, just thousands. And I don't mean like, okay, Japan's got, let's say, 500 werewolves. No, I mean, there might be a werewolf, but then there might be 400 other types of shapeshifters. So, and that's true pretty much everywhere. It's just amazing.
A
The
question in
break.
the chat room is, what about jaguars in South America?
Jaguars?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, jaguar is an animal. I don't, I'm not sure I get the question. They don't
Well,
shapeshift, you know.
are there beliefs that people may shapeshift
Oh
into
yeah,
jaguars?
well,
Yeah.
sure, okay, yeah. I mean, if you look at some of the indigenous cultures, especially in South America and Africa, places like that, it's typical for a shaman to lead some kind of ritualistic, practice, and maybe help it along with some hallucinogenics from the environment, like magic mushrooms
Yeah.
and those kinds of things. But it'll do it, and then
Right.
frequently wear the pelt of an animal, so they could be wearing a jaguar pelt or something like that. And then through the idea of the trance and all the meditation and everything, shift or believe they shift into that animal. So yeah, I mean, it certainly could be a jaguar, and again, just one of many that they could do or become.
Right. What makes people believe that something could be a shapeshifter? Do you think? I
That's,
mean, is it because they witness it, or how's that work? Do you
well,
think?
yeah, I mean, sure. When people have an eyewitness account, they're stunned, right? Because they really can't believe what they see, but they know what they saw.
Right.
And there may be at some point someday an explanation, but they know that they saw a person change into something. I mean, in my
Mhm.
book, I have a lot of reports from
Mhm.
even like the last 30, 40 years or so of, shape-shifting incidents in India, in the UK, in Africa, where people have sworn that they were there. They saw this happen.
Mhm.
And, like the one in India was about it wasn't, the Indian people called it a man wolf instead of what we would say a wolf man, but it
Mhm.
sounded like a werewolf. And in this particular area of India, there were killings. Children were carried off and murdered. And this went on for over 2 years. Something like 100 people, 100 kids disappeared. I mean, the New York Times wrote an article about it. There was a reporter out there in India interviewing people who said, I saw this. I saw this thing snatch this little 6-year-old kid, throw him over its shoulder, and then run off on two legs like a man,
Mhm.
yet looking like a wolf.
Mhm.
So, I mean, if you have the experience, like what they say, seeing is believing,
Right.
you
Right.
know,
Right.
so I think so. But I also think there's something about the character generally that appeals to us because, a shapeshifter is somebody that can say, you know what, I'm going to throw off everything that sort of constrains me, like my religion, the
Mhm.
laws, my sense of morality. I'm going to get rid of all that stuff. I'm going to be a wild, crazy animal. I'm going to go out and howl at the moon and create
Mhm.
mayhem, right? Well, in a lot of ways, that appeals to us as human beings because we do have that animal nature, right?
Mhm.
And almost any one of us would say, boy, just for 10 minutes, if I can just go crazy and do what I want with no repercussions, some of us would do that, and some of us
Right.
will get in trouble doing that, But I think that appeal is what makes people either actually believe in shapeshifters or just really interested in them.
Okay.
When I talk about that, I mean the quintessential story is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right?
Mhm.
Robert Louis Stevenson's novel, where you have this doctor, Jekyll, who is a Christian, moral, upright human being, cares about humanity, saves people's lives, and yet, he has this little sort of, I don't know what you call it, a little itch that, again, what would it be like if I didn't have to be this kind of a decent guy? What can I do? What go crazy? And so he creates this potion that changes him into Mr. Hyde, who ends
Mhm.
up killing somebody. He's a thoroughly despicable person. And it becomes so bad that Jekyll commits suicide later on because he can no longer control Hyde, who keeps coming out, right?
Mhm.
But that thing, that is the basic kind of idea that I'm talking about. That we all think, what if I could do what I wanted to do without any repercussions? And
Mhm.
so the shapeshifter books and movies and all these kinds of things, all the popular culture about shapeshifters, dressing up, cosplay, even dressing up at
Mhm.
Halloween. This is all shapeshifting, and it
Mhm.
gives us like a safe outlet, to sort of vicariously indulge in being a shapeshifter, where you're
Mhm.
not hurting anybody, you're not hurting yourself, you're
Mhm.
not committing any crimes, you're not going to get locked up, but for a couple of minutes, you're a shapeshifter.
How do we compare? Like, okay, the changes. How does somebody become? Okay, first off, how does one become a shapeshifter? Do you have to be bitten? How does that work?
Well, you have to go to shapeshifter school. That's the first thing, and then no, I don't.
I know.
May, maybe not. Get your degree in shapeshifterology,
There
and
you go. Yeah.
no, well, again, if you look at some of the folk tales and mythology and everything about shapeshifters,
Right.
frequently becoming a shapeshifter was a curse, right? You
Right.
didn't want that to happen, but
Right.
like especially like in Greek and Roman mythology, the
Mhm.
gods and goddesses, I mean, every day they were taking some poor mortal and and cursing him and changing him into something, so you don't have much say in that. But later on, as we get into more I don't know, I guess so the Middle Ages and even a little bit earlier than that, when you start getting people who are, um, how would I say it? I guess engaged in becoming like sorcerers and
Right.
conjurers or witches or whatever. They begin to experiment more with taking that power that the gods used to have, which was the ability to transform. And so they started doing that through, rituals and magic and all this kind of stuff. Again, whether they did or not
Mm-hmm.
is debatable, but that's it. But it's interesting because there are people that have put together some theories that shapeshifters, you don't become one. You are born as one. In other words,
Okay.
it's like a species in its own right. There's a writer named Stephen Graham Jones, who is a Native
Mm-hmm.
American writer. He's written a lot of horror novels, and he's written about vampires.
Mm-hmm.
And his vampires are, no, I'm sorry, werewolves. And his werewolves are not cursed. They're not under the influence of, a sorcerer or anything like that. They are
Mm-hmm.
simply werewolves. And at a
Mm-hmm.
certain time, they're human beings, and at a certain time in their life, they develop the werewolf ability to transform, and they can transform at will whenever
Mm-hmm.
they want to. So, there are sort of what I say, popular culture has shifted a little bit where we're getting out of the idea of cursing, and
Mm-hmm.
now getting to the fact where we can control our own destinies because being a werewolf is something you just are.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
but you can't just necessarily go say, okay, I'm gonna be a shapeshifter today. You know.
How does the research that you've done compare with what people see in the media and the movies?
Well, that's interesting. Because I think pop culture and I think the movies and especially probably movies and some of the novels have
Mm-hmm.
kind of twisted some of the um, early lore about some of these shapeshifters and put a new spin to them. For
Mm-hmm.
instance, if you look at vampires, which again are considered, shapeshifters, right?
Mm-hmm.
The typical vampire, at least in the maybe 50s and 60s and 40s, was like, Bela Lugosi, Count
Right.
Dracula, that kind of guy, right? A gaunt, mysterious kind of guy. Then you end up with the vampires, from Twilight and some of these other things that are they're
Right.
sexy and rich and wealthy and educated and articulate, and they're not anything like Count Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go back to the earliest vampire legends, the early vampires didn't even, take blood. They didn't even hunt humans and take blood.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't look anything like some kind of wasted, emaciated guy. Most
Mm-hmm.
of them were actually pretty corpulent. They were healthy and ruddy and looking healthy because
Mm-hmm.
they were living off the life force of human hosts, not blood, but
Mm-hmm.
life force. And it was more like a
Mm-hmm.
psychic thing than anything else. And those are
Mm-hmm.
the early vampires. And somewhere, somehow, maybe Bram Stoker had something to do with that with Dracula, but then they became, bloodsuckers.
Right.
And they
And
weren't
look at
always that way.
and think
So
of it this way: somehow we got from Nosferatu to the Twilight vampires, because
yeah, yeah, right.
Nosferatu
Oh
was a
yeah.
scary looking dude, boy.
Well, and that's much worse than Bela Lugosi or
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
as Dracula, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, he's yeah, yeah. That's about the
He was
creepiest vampire
scary.
I've ever
For
seen.
a silent film, it's spooky. Yeah, that's a spooky one.
I
Um,
still that movie, the silent movie anyway, the original one.
yeah, I love that movie. I could watch it over and over. But I mean, plus I'm half Hungarian, so I mean that's my
There you go. There
that's
you
why
go.
there we go. Yeah.
Well, you'd
Um,
like my trip to Romania then,
I would have
because
loved it. Absolutely.
you know
Absolutely.
actually the
In fact,
people besides doing all the Dracula the stuff,
yeah.
I spent some time with in a village up in Transylvania, which was Hungarian
Okay.
people up there. There's
Hmm.
a lot of Hungarians in that part of
Yes.
Romania, so
Yeah.
got to know those folks too.
And my father, I was only like 9 years old, 10 years old. With his wicked sense of humor. The house we're staying in is about 6 miles from Dracula's castle. That really made me feel good too as a kid.
So you were
Thanks,
there,
Pop. Yeah, so we were there.
yeah, yeah.
What do you think? I mean, what do you think keeps these legends going? What do you think is
Well,
the
again, I
driving
think
force?
I'll go back to what I said before about how I think
Sure.
we all have sort of this these feelings inside us, kind of these wishes, if you will.
Mhm.
And so I think it gives us a great outlet just to do it, to think, wow, what I mean, if you could shapeshift into anything that you wanted,
Mhm.
if you had that power, I mean, think about that. What would you do? And you could make yourself, anything you want it to be. And so even sort of just basic psychology, if you're a person who always, all your life you felt that, well, you weren't smart enough, you weren't
Mhm.
pretty enough, you weren't strong enough, whatever it was, the idea of a shapeshifter, where you can take this little personality that you think is not that good and change it into some kind of superhero or whatever you wanted,
Mhm.
how
Mhm.
powerful is that, right?
Mhm.
So again, I think it's just something that we buy into psychologically. And
Mhm.
I think as long as we continue to do that, the idea of becoming something other than what we are is always going to be appealing to people. And that's the
Mhm.
shapeshifter.
Mhm. Are people, willing to talk to you about this stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Like you say, oh yeah, I write about this. You go out, like me being a newspaper reporter. You saw a ghost, blah 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 blah. So are people really open about this now?
Yeah, they are. I mean, the funny thing is, you mentioned ghosts. When I first started writing the ghost books,
Mhm.
um, when I first started those, some of the programs were just coming on TV, like the
Right.
Ghost Hunters, the original ones. Those are just now coming on TV. So because they were on TV, it opened up sort of ghost hunting and the paranormal to the world at large. So
Right.
people didn't feel, stupid or embarrassed or anything about talking about
Mhm.
their experiences because, hey, it's on TV. They found it. Right?
Mhm.
So I found the same thing with shapeshifters too. Although I don't think that stigma was there as much as it was with ghosts,
Mhm.
because I think when you just hear sort of the number of stories about paranormal entities,
Mhm.
I think what you hear about ghosts far outweighs even shapeshifters, as popular as
Right.
they are.
Right.
So and a lot of people. I mean, in my books, I interviewed so many people who had experiences, ghostly experiences, and
Mhm.
we're no longer afraid to talk about it because TV helped kind of open up to the public. So
So do you think like some of these shows, and my mind is like yellow right now, but of people talking about shapeshifters and shows has done the same thing.
do I didn't hear the last part of that.
Do you think that people being so open now, even with shapeshifters, that that's done the same thing, so that people are more honest about hey, I think I saw this, or I know I saw this, running through the woods, because
Yeah,
we've seen this stuff on TV.
yeah. I mean, I think so. Yeah, sure. I think that helps again. If it's in popular culture, by its very name, popular means
Mhm.
people are into it, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So the more we hear about it, the more our people are willing to talk about it. I do a lot of radio shows that have a lot of call-ins, and
Mhm.
uh, when I did, if I'm talking about shapeshifters or ghosts, whatever, people will call in and they'll
Mhm.
say, "Well, I had this experience," and I mean, I've had people send me emails after some of the programs, especially about shapeshifters, and tell me that they are shapeshifters. It's
Interesting.
okay. I don't know what to make of that. Like, okay, congratulations. I don't know, but they'll come and tell me and say, yeah, I'm a shapeshifter. I heard you on the radio. I said, okay, you're gonna. I don't know what that.
Are there any stories that you've heard that have really stuck out in your mind?
Um, from the people like that have said that.
Yeah, or from the people you've
Um,
interviewed that have seen them or whatever.
yeah, there was one guy I talked about. I don't know if I can remember the whole thing, but again, remember I said earlier about being out west, like in the
Right.
Southwest,
Right.
and that's where he said that, if I get the story right, that he thought he had transformed into, I think he said, a coyote, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
And then I said, well, how, what, I mean, how did you feel? And he said, I don't know, I just had this. It was strange because he really couldn't articulate how
Mhm.
that happened, or why. But he said, I just had this feeling that my perception was different, that I was like in a, a different kind of perception than human, that was more like what an animal would see or do. And he felt that he was disoriented, that he didn't
Mhm.
really have a clear sense of sort of where he was or whatever.
Mhm.
To me, I mean, frankly, I, I don't know that tells me he transformed into anything, but I mean, this is his
Mhm.
experience, and I
Mhm.
can't I can't judge what he felt, or that's up to him. But it didn't. It sounded very unusual.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What strikes you about all these cases? The ones you've done research on. Is there a lot of parallels, with these cases, or do you see scattered, you know, information on them, or what?
Well, I think there's. I think the answer to your question is both yes and no, because what I found was, for instance, let's take the werewolf as a type.
Mm-hmm.
I collected stories from France and from Germany and from Romania and Hungary and those areas. So we're talking about different European countries, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yet the basic sort of um, history about them and what they do and how they act and how they
Mm-hmm.
behave and everything like that was very similar. If I was in France talking about a werewolf, and then I went to Germany or somewhere and talked about a werewolf, it's saying, well, this is what I heard in France. They would say, oh, yeah, yeah. Same thing here. They knew that.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, you can go to some other, further out, like maybe to Africa or someplace, or someplace where there are still wolves, maybe even America.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about werewolves here, but are they a little
Right.
different because, we're out of that European culture? I don't know. I mean, you
Right.
got to remember that they're shapeshifters, which means they are at least human. And so they're
Mm-hmm.
coming from a certain human culture that's going to have similarities or dissimilarities. Um, but then you get to places like Japan that has such weird shapeshifters that I've
Mm-hmm.
never, they're not similar to anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One kind of unique aspect of shapeshifters in Japan is that a lot of the shapeshifters are actually ghosts. So
Right.
instead of just being human beings that shift into something, these
Mm-hmm.
are human beings who have died and are now ghosts. And the ghost then shapeshifts. And the ghosts frequently in the Japanese legends and stories will shapeshift into another person rather than an animal. And usually they'll come back. That shapeshifting ghost person
Mm-hmm.
will come back to generally get some revenge on, a lover that jilted them or something along those lines. And
Mm-hmm.
once they've done that, they'll return back to the ghost form and probably not
Mm-hmm.
come back again. I don't know of any other culture that has that kind of a shapeshifter.
Mm-hmm.
A dead person shapeshifting is what it is, which is
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty different.
Now the question I have is, where do you think these stories come from? Are they, is it dreaming for somebody, or, like you say, this could be physically happening? What do you think? Is it legends or what?
Well, I think there's legends, but again, I think every legend comes from our own brains. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
legends aren't hanging on a tree and you just go pick one off and say, let's look at this legend, right? We make
Right.
them up.
Right.
And so I think, again, going back to the idea of uh, what I think about shapeshifters sort of answering some kind of a need or desire that we all have as humans, that
Mm-hmm.
we make up legends that support that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but, interestingly, as I said, they go way back, even before the time that we were writing legends or anything like that. The earliest evidence of a shapeshifter is a cave painting in France, and it's from the Neolithic period, so it's prehistoric.
Mm-hmm.
It's before anybody was writing or even anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I have the picture in my book. I have the drawing of it, and the cave painting basically shows what looks like a human being. He's standing up. Well, let me back up. It looks like a deer or a stag of some kind standing up on its hind legs. But when you look at it closely, you'll notice that, and he's got the front legs are kind of raised up. If you look at him, you'll notice that they don't have hoofs on the feet. Um, there's toes. There's toes on all four legs at the end on the feet. They have toes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, animals don't have toes like that. These are like human
Right.
toes, right? And then when you look at the face, the head is kind of turned directly towards the front. You're seeing the animal in profile, but the head is turned. And if you look at the eyes are like ours. They're dead center. They're not like camel. They're not on the sides like you would expect a deer or something to have,
Mm-hmm.
further over. And it's got antlers. So people say, so what is this thing? Well, anthropologists say that is a depiction of a shaman transforming into a deer. So this, it's what they call hunter magic, because the
Mm-hmm.
shaman would have gotten a bunch of the hunters from the tribe together, and they would have done some kind of a ritual, chanting or drumming or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And while they're doing that, the shaman's painting this, painting on the wall. And
Mm-hmm.
as I said before, they've probably ingested some kind of some hallucinogenic or something, and so they're probably wearing animal pelts. So next thing you
Mm-hmm.
know, they've become, and I put that in air quotes, they've become these animals. And so they can
Mm-hmm.
go out and hunt them because they can get closer to them. If you're hunting deer and you are a deer, you can get right up to the herd, right?
Right.
So,
Makes sense.
so again, so once you have that basis, I mean, the legends and stories just get passed down. Well, this is how you hunt. We all become deer. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so you believe
Mm-hmm.
that.
So when you're doing your research, are you looking for comparisons between societies and what they see, or is it a surprise for you to see if that there are comparisons? You know.
Yeah, I wasn't really out there looking for that. I was just
Mm-hmm.
basically going to an area and saying, okay, I've heard that there's some, shape shifting legends from here or
Mm-hmm.
some historical incidents that may have occurred. And so let me check it out. Let me see what's here. But not necessarily saying, oh, I want to compare this to what it's like in France or something.
Mm-hmm.
But as
Mm-hmm.
I gathered all these stories and gathered all this evidence and all this research, as I said, I did find similarities between a lot of cultures on some of these things.
Interesting. What do you think is the strongest similarity?
Well, I think probably the idea of shapeshifting into an animal. Now that might
Mm-hmm.
sound like, excuse me, that might sound like, well, yeah, let's take that for granted. But a true shapeshifter has the ability to shapeshift into anything. So it could be an animal, it could be another person, or it could be, even as in Japanese culture, it could be an inanimate object. So you
Mm-hmm.
can literally
Mm-hmm.
transform into a dustpan if you wanted to. I don't know why
Mm-hmm.
you'd want to, but you could. So I think the biggest commonality is probably that most of the shape shifting is into some kind of an animal form.
Interesting. Interesting. And do the shapeshifters? I mean, because they're animals. What about food? I mean, are they eating it? Are they eating like are they vegans? Are they eating meat or what are they eating? Because you would think there'd be like if somebody's a vegetarian and he shapeshifts into a werewolf. I mean,
Well, yeah, I don't know what werewolves eat. I mean, that's an interesting question, but I would have to say that you're right. I mean, wolves are not particularly thought of as vegetarians, so I'd
right.
imagine if you transform in one, if you have transformed into an animal, you're an animal. So I would imagine even if you were a vegetarian as a human being and you change into a wolf, you would probably ditch the cabbage and go after the chickens. I don't
Okay.
know.
Okay. Okay. Have you been on any investigations to look for any of these things?
Um, no, not investigations as such. I've been to places where um, shape shifting events occurred. So,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, in France, I was in an area of France, basically called Gévaudan, and there was something called the Beast of Gévaudan,
Mm-hmm.
which in the 18th century was this enormous kind of canine of some kind that ravaged villages throughout that area for about a period of 2 years and
Mm-hmm.
killed like over 100 villagers. And so I went to these villages, and a lot of them had little memorials set up in the town square to
Mm-hmm.
somebody that fought off the beast or some victims of the beast. There was even a museum in one of the towns that had sort of the history of the beast and some little pieces that they thought were evidence, like I think like maybe a gun that was used by one of the hunters to go after them or anything. So that wasn't a hunt, but I mean I was in the area on the ground
Mm-hmm.
where this beast had been. And the people that were living there today, obviously they had no firsthand experience of a creature that was running around there 200 years before they were born, but they had the stories. A lot of them passed down from their ancestors, their parents,
Mm-hmm.
their grandparents, their great grandparents about the beast. So that was pretty interesting to do that.
Question in the chat room is: have you seen or do you believe they exist?
Well, it depends on what we're talking about. So
Mm-hmm.
I have not seen a typical, werewolf vampire transformation. I haven't seen. I don't. That's that'd be pretty unusual to see that. But in my
Mm-hmm.
book, I talk about two different types, sort of broad classes of shapeshifters. And one is an external shapeshifter, which is the typical werewolf, vampire, whatever, where you can actually see a physical transformation, right? A
Mm-hmm.
guy turning into a wolf. If you think of the movie American Werewolf in London, if you see, I mean, that was an amazing transformation that they did in film, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that is an external shapeshifter. But I also make the case that there's something called an internal shapeshifter where you don't see any exterior change. You don't see somebody physically change, but
Mm-hmm.
you know that there's something that happened to them mentally. And I'm not talking necessarily about being mentally ill. I mean, it could be. Maybe that kind of a shapeshifter is just somebody who's mentally ill. We're
Mm-hmm.
talking about somebody that becomes something other than what you would expect.
Mm-hmm.
So I think of somebody like Ted Bundy, right? He was a serial killer. We all remember him. And what people said about him was that when you saw him, he was this clean cut, American kind of collegiate looking kid, young guy. Um, Very helpful to people. He'd help you put your groceries in the car. He'd escort little old ladies across the street. He was friendly, but he was a monster, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he killed people. And yet that's not how he looked. But something inside him was saying, I'm a monster. And psychologists and psychiatrists could make a case for it and say it's mental illness. And I'd say, well, maybe it is, but to me that is still shape shifting. Maybe it's not a voluntary thing. You know,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's you can't help it. There
Mm-hmm.
was a guy in Ohio here. Um, his name is I forgot, Savelli. His name is Guy Savelli. The guy's name is
Mm-hmm.
Guy Savelli. And Guy was a martial arts expert in a couple of different types of martial arts. And he gave a lot of training to Navy SEALs, to special ops guys, and that kind of stuff. But he also did a lot of mental kind of things. He was into remote viewing and all this. And he gave classes on sort of training, mental skills and mental abilities. And one of his students, I got the story from a student, said that he and Guy were in a bar one time, and they were just sitting there having a beer or whatever. And some big dude comes over to them. They didn't know who he was. He didn't know them, but he was drunk. And he just
Mm-hmm.
started getting in Guy's face. Hey, buddy, get up. I want to pick you. I'm going to kick your, whatever. I'm going to punch you
Right.
out. So, so Guy stands up and he faces this guy. And the student is sitting there watching. He's in the chair watching. Oh, man, this is going to be terrible. It's going to be a big fight. But he says that all of a sudden he looks at Guy and he says that he sees that Guy's face. He said, I don't know how to explain it. He said, but I wasn't looking at Guy Savelli anymore. I was looking at what looked like the face of a tiger. And he
Wow.
said the drunk just kind of went, his eyes went big and he just kind of backed off. He said, oh, okay, man, okay. And he walked away. That was it. And then Guy sits down and he's fine looking. And the student kind of said, what the heck? And Guy said something like, oh, you saw that, huh? Well, so here's the thing where the student said, I can't say that he really changed. I mean, but somehow that image, that idea that he had become a tiger was there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was enough that the drunk looking at him eye to eye saw that
Mm-hmm.
too. But it wasn't really an external thing. He didn't grow claws and he didn't get stripes and go around growling on all fours, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the internal thing I'm talking about too.
Interesting. Is it hard to do this research?
It's time consuming. Um, I think any research is hard if you don't go about it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to find out as much as I can before I go into the field.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that it's important to be at the places where whatever it is you're researching, where it
Mm-hmm.
happened, or where you can talk to people and get eyewitness accounts or historical artifacts or archives or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not as difficult as much as it's just time consuming and it requires a fair amount of organizational ability.
Are you aware? Because I know we talk about the vampires, you know, going down to the bats, right? They turn to the bats, they fly off. Are you aware of any other types of shapeshifters that um, will change into something that flies?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. There's a bunch of them. There's something out of, I want to say, Central America, but I'm not sure exactly what. And I forgot what it's called in Spanish. But
Right.
basically, it's a person that they change into a flying. This is really weird. It's almost like a bat, but when people say that they've seen it, they said it doesn't
Mhm.
look like a bat. It looks more just like a head with wings. So,
Mhm.
okay, there's that. There was a story I got from Africa where some villagers saw a flock of big black birds fly over the
Mhm.
village. And they didn't think anything of it. It's Africa. There's a lot of birds, but these were big, more usual. And they were walking. The villagers are walking somewhere, and they found this woman sitting on the road, or the path, or whatever. And she was an
Mhm.
old woman, an elderly woman, and she was in pretty rough shape, like she was pretty exhausted and kind of beat up. So they went to her and they said, "Well, are you okay? What happened?" And she said, "Well, she said, yeah, I'm fine." She said, "But I'm a witch, and I was flying back with my coven as a bird, and that somehow," she said, midair, "I lost my abilities." She said, "I'm old. I lost my abilities." And so she literally crashed, literally crashed to the ground. So, I mean, there's the shapeshifter story of going the reverse from some kind
Mhm.
of a bird to
Mhm.
a person. But yeah, oh yeah, there's a
Mhm.
lot. Yeah, it's
Which
it's
which brings
unbelievable. I mean,
which
it just
brings me to kind of think about the Mothman. Is the Mothman? I mean, do we think the Mothman is
I don't
is
know.
what he is, or could he be a shapeshifter? It's just that
I don't know. I
he
mean,
doesn't
I
convert
haven't
all the
done a
way.
whole lot of research on him, but everything
Yeah.
that I hear makes me think that he's more, a cryptid of some kind, maybe.
Sure.
Or a lot of
Sure.
people think it's an alien of some type, but I don't.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
haven't heard anything about him being a shapeshifter or it being a
Yeah.
shapeshifter. So I don't know about that.
Kind of makes me wonder. So should people? I mean, should people fear these things?
I would imagine.
It's a stupid question. Yeah, I
I mean,
know.
I would say if you were facing a werewolf, yeah, I'd be kind of afraid.
I mean, there's those stories of people driving, and then they look out the window and this thing
Yeah,
is keeping pace with it
running
while they're
alongside their
driving.
car.
Yeah,
Oh
running
yeah,
alongside the car.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I have to believe that anything like that can be a pretty terrifying event.
Mhm. 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 Do
Which
you
is
think?
interesting though, because
Go ahead.
again, in some of the folklore that I found,
Mhm.
we tend to think that shapeshifters are all these evil, scary, monsters because we
Right.
like that. We like the
Right.
evil monster part.
Right.
But in some of the legends and folklore that I found, there are shapeshifters that um, are fine with people. That they're not evil. In fact, they're even helpful sometimes, like leaving food on your doorstep if you need food or something.
Mhm.
So there's that too. They
Mhm.
don't get as much press as the bloodsuckers do, but
Right. Right.
they're out there.
Um, Mike in the chat says alien in a human form. What do you think about that?
Oh well, so there's the whole thing about reptilian alien shapeshifters, which is David, I guess David Icke's from England, who talked about them coming to Earth, some
Right.
reptilian aliens coming to Earth like millions of years ago, and
Mhm.
then mating with whatever kind of sort of proto humans were running around on the planet at the time, and their
Mhm.
DNA, their genetic material passing on. So today we have these shapeshifters that can shift from a reptilian form to a human form,
Mhm.
according to his beliefs.
I have heard that from guests in the past about alien DNA being within us. That's what I have heard over the
Oh
years.
yeah, yeah, it's
People
pretty
like that.
common. I mean, I know he has something like 1 million people or something that subscribe
Mhm.
to his newsletter, if not more. But and that's certainly been um, the focus of some movies and novels and everything like
Mhm.
that too.
Mhm.
So it's in the popular culture.
Is there any like I know about the Beast of Bray Road? That's a biggie. Um, like you say, the concentration is mainly in the West for these creatures. But is there a particular region where I mean, like you look at California, you look at the NorCal California with Sasquatch. As far as like werewolves and things like that, is there any particular concentration area? Do you think?
Yeah, they're all in Sacramento.
That's it.
Um, yeah, they're all,
I believe it.
yeah. No, I mean, again, like I said, I find shape-shifting stories everywhere, and I don't
Okay.
know the werewolves. I think particularly sort of evolved, legendary and everything else in
Uh-huh.
Europe.
In Europe.
Primarily even Eastern Europe. Oh,
Uh-huh.
and vampires. Although there's stories about vampires even from ancient Egypt and Babylonia, so that's there too. Um, but no, I think every region, every place in the world seems to have some shapeshifter lore, and it's probably unique to its area and its culture.
Uh-huh. 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 Because I even heard in the Old West. I heard in the Old West they, they saw them as well.
The Old West.
Yeah, like Tombstone and that
Oh,
era where they were seeing
oh
stuff.
well, yeah. I mean, they could have been talking about what Native Americans have talked about all this time about skinwalkers or whatever. That could be.
One of my moderators says, "I knew it was you." Yeah, it's me. Every night I change. Yeah, that's why I don't sleep at night. I'm out moving around, scaring people. What do you like about doing this type of research?
Well, I'm a writer, and by being a writer, I just have a lot of curiosity about a whole lot
Mm-hmm.
of things, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
shapeshifters or werewolves or I don't know, butterflies. I don't know what, but anyway, So what I like about it is that I have an independent lifestyle.
Right.
I follow what I'm interested in. I get to do
Mm-hmm.
what I want to do, and I meet some fascinating people, and I go to some fascinating places. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's all good. Plus, I mean, I'm a writer. I love to write. So
Is there any consistent conditions for a shapeshifter to appear? Because I mean, over the years from the movies and everything, it's always a full moon, turn into a werewolf and all this. But I mean, does there have to be a certain condition for these things to appear?
you know where that full moon thing came from? It came from the Lon Chaney Wolfman movie in 1930,
There you go.
39,
See,
something
yeah,
like that. Yeah,
yeah.
there's a poem about when the moon is out or whatever. That's when it turns werewolf. Prior to that,
Uh-huh.
werewolves had absolutely no connection with the moon whatsoever in any
Okay,
culture.
okay, okay.
This was, I mean, whoever came up with that, I mean, it stuck, didn't it?
Right,
Because now we always say, oh yeah, full moons,
right,
werewolves,
right,
and
right.
up to that, prior to that time, it wasn't there. So I guess the answer is I don't I don't know for sure if there has to be
Sure.
pre-existing conditions. The moon thing was just
Right,
made up for the movie,
right, right,
but
right.
I mean there may be some conditions that are um, more conducive maybe for a
Mm-hmm.
shapeshifter to transform. I don't know.
Well, I mean, like you talked about earlier, we talked. You glanced over history of movies. Getting into the Twilight Saga. Where you got not only got the vampires in there, you've also got the werewolves in there,
Yeah,
and
right.
but you kind of lit on. I mean, she did some research on this stuff because the werewolves, of course, ran in families. Within the Native American tribes. But I
Hmm.
mean, but like you say, it's gone through this change to where they're glamorous. These things are glamorous
Oh
now.
yeah,
These vampires are
yeah,
glamorous
yeah. Right,
where they
right.
weren't before. I've had vampires call me to be on the show in the past, and
I'm not
werewolves.
surprised.
People that claim that they're werewolves. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to talk with these people because I know Sacramento, and this is Sacramento has a. I'm not saying underlying thing. I don't want to get in trouble with somebody showing up at my house, like flying through my windows and stuff. But we do have a big population of people that believe that they're vampires or they're into that sort of thing.
In Sacramento.
Yeah, in Sacramento, yeah,
Yeah,
in this
I
area.
know there's um, I know there's folks in New Orleans and actually in upstate New York. I think it's not
Hmm.
Buffalo. I forgot where it was, but yeah, and they don't call themselves vampires. They
Hmm.
call them, at least in these cultures, they call themselves sanguinarians.
Yes, yeah.
But they do maintain that they need to ingest human blood, for their own health and their own well-being.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
it's so different, right? Because at least with those two groups that I'm talking about,
Right,
uh, donating is voluntary, and they don't go out preying on people,
right.
and it's done in very hygienic, sanitary, medical conditions, just as if you're
Hmm.
donating blood at a Red Cross shelter or something.
Mm-hmm.
Same.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what do you see coming for you for next? What's on your agenda?
Well, I'm actually kind of switching gears again a little bit. 2 years ago, I co-authored a book with my cousin, and it's a novel. It's historical fiction with fantasy elements, and it's called The
Mm-hmm.
Bottle Conjurer.
Cool.
And it's a trilogy. And the second one is coming out this spring, but it does have in it shapeshifters and conjurers and stuff like that. So it's not anything based on, well, it is based on research, but it's not nonfiction. It's a novel. It's a
Mm-hmm.
trilogy. But we're pretty happy with it. The first one is on Amazon now, The Bottle Conjurer, but the second one will be out in the spring, and then the third one will be out. I don't know, maybe 2026, a little bit of luck. But yeah, so I'm doing some of that. Doing a little bit of middle grade books for kids, paranormal stuff,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and still out speaking and coming on programs like yours.
What do you think keeps people interested in this stuff?
Me. No,
Yeah, well, besides that, yeah, obviously.
I don't know. I think again, anything paranormal, it's mysterious, it's the unknown, and I
Mm-hmm.
think we're all just curious about that kind of stuff. We all like to, I'll say, dabble a little bit with the unknown, especially if it's got a little bit of creepy element to it,
Mm-hmm.
because we always like to sort of push the fear factor a little. I mean, there was a show on TV called Fear Factor.
Right.
How
Right.
many spiders can you put in your mouth before you freak out? I don't know.
Ugh.
So those kinds of things. But yeah, so I just think that's part of it. Maybe it's the same kind of curiosity that you know people do when they shoot rockets off to the moon, and whatever. It's like, what's out there? What is this about?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I always ask this question at the end. Maybe I haven't done it for you yet. Who knows? You're on the strip in Las Vegas. You're standing there. There's some bookstores out there. Some other authors who are writing on similar topics. How do you get people to come in to read your books?
I pay them. Pay them, offer them with
Pay them
scotch.
off when they come
I
in.
don't, well, it's funny you say that because there's a conference in Las Vegas in June that I'm going to, and it's the Historical Novel Society. So I will be doing it. No, it's tough. I mean, I do a lot of book expos, book conventions, whatever they're called, book fairs, where
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, you might be with a hundred different writers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's hard because people walk by, you get maybe just a couple of seconds to give them a quick pitch, like, hey, whatever. Well, for the bottle conjurer, for instance, I got a little gimmick. I have a wine bottle. The title is The
Okay.
Bottle Conjurer. I have a wine bottle. And the premise behind the bottle conjurer is whether it's possible for a conjurer, or sorcerer, or whatever you want to call him, to put himself into a wine bottle.
Okay.
Well, right away, we all say, no, of course not. So, anyway, so I have this bottle. And so if somebody walks by, I'll say, hey, wait a minute. I'll say, can you see this bottle? Yeah. Come here. Can you put your finger in it? Yeah, sure. I put my finger in it. So I'll do that. Put his finger in the bottle. Right? I can do that. Okay. Can you put your hand in there? No. Can you put your whole body in there? Are you crazy? What are you talking about? Well, somebody, and then I can go and talk about the book. Well, in this
Mm-hmm.
book, The Bottle Conjurer. So, I mean, that's how you do it. You have to have a pitch. I mean, I know a lot of writers that have some visual things on their table or whatever that'll,
Mm-hmm.
light up or whatever. But the best thing is to be able to talk about your book and have a story. Like, why should you read this thing? There's 200 other books you can buy here. Why should
Right.
you go on mine?
Right. Absolutely.
And here's
Well,
your scotch and soda.
it is always fun to have you on. It's
Well,
always
thank you,
joy.
Charlotte.
Love to
It's
get you
fun to be
back
here.
on when you're ready with your other books. Okay.
Sure.
Love to get you back on. It's always a blast. Learned so much from you. Audience loved it. Had lots of participation tonight. Thank you so much, John.
You're welcome.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much. All
You
right,
take
you
care.
have a great rest of your evening. We're gonna get you back on, okay?
All right. I'll be here.
I promise.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye
All right,
bye.
John. Thanks so much.
Take care.
Bye bye. Maybe is it going? Where'd it go? New buttons to push. Okay. All right, guys. Now it's always fun to have him on. Love having him on. Tomorrow, another old friend of ours is going to come by. Barry Strom is going to come by with his special channeling board. And what a lot of people don't realize right now is Elvis Presley. This is his 90th birthday month, and so I thought it would be kind of fun to have Barry come on and channel Elvis, and the audience can ask Elvis some questions. How's that sound? So that'll be tomorrow night, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, right here again. If you want to join me, I'm going to be leaving here, and after I get done here, I'm going to be heading over to TikTok for California Haunts TikTok, where I will be doing a 3-card tarot card readings. You get to hear about your past, your present, and your future. And come on over. The readings are free. We have a good time. We chit-chat. We talk about the paranormal. We do all kinds of things. I want to thank everybody who joined me tonight in the chat room. Mike, I've got Jennifer. If I forget anybody, I'm sorry. Mike, Jennifer, Lori, Marisa. Uh, Mike, Jennifer, Lori, Marisa. Yeah. So and Pamela. I didn't want to forget anybody. So thank you guys for coming into the chat room tonight and adding to the discussion. That's what we have. I don't have my backdrop up. I almost did today, because what is the theme of this show? Come join the conversation, right? That's what it's all about, is input from you guys as well. All right. So I will see you guys in about, for those of you that come on over to TikTok, I will see you guys in about a half hour over at TikTok, so we can start doing some really fun readings. Otherwise, tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, join me here for Barry Strom, and we're going to be talking to Elvis. All right. See you guys tomorrow, or later on today or tomorrow, and have a great night. Bye-bye.